invite Father Stanislaus, SVD. He is our first speaker. He had some difficulty entering in, but now he is in. Father Lazar is the General Mission Secretary of the Society of the Divine Word, based in their generalate in Rome. He is a trained missiologist and was the former president of the International Association of Catholic Missiologists. I remember him as the director of Ishwani Kendra, the Institute of Missiology in Pune, for many years. He was also the provincial superior of the SVDs of Bombay province. And Stani will speak to us today on how the church has responded to COVID-19, what has been its prophetic presence in the midst of COVID-19, how has the church been that witness and proclaimer of the good news that all of us are called to be in these times of the pandemic. Father Stanley.
The COVID-19 and the church response. This is the topic which is given to me, and we are discussing about this during this particular seminar. In a short time, just to give you brief response, how the church looks at it. COVID-19 is much more than a health crisis. It is a human crisis. The coronavirus disease is attacking societies at their core. So therefore, we try to look at this response. I have divided into three parts. One is at intra, second one is at extra, and the third one is our response. What could be our response? That is the way I try to see this particular presentation. The first one is at intra. At intra, especially the spirituality. We prayed fervently during this coronavirus time. More devotions and reflections on sickness, sufferings, and death. Did anxiety, doubts, and selfishness overtake our beliefs? What does the Spirit really prompt us to deepen our spirituality? Just looking at intra, about our own life as religious, as the church, as personal, different ways. As a community, the church, or we are thinking about ourselves, especially about our own community at this time, how we have responded, followed the instructions, the restricted travels and some immune boosters as well. We are taking care of the elderly confreres. We continued with all celebrations. A real danger is when we start accusing others, if someone was sick or someone is really bringing the virus into the community. But also, how did we really address the fear and the anxiety and the lonely or elderly confreres? So that is also another question that we could pose, especially to our own community. How much are we thought about the poor and the migrants during the lockdown as a community? Well, certainly we have done much, but could we have done more? And this is how I try to look at a little critically regarding this particular virus time or this particular pandemic. Thirdly, the leadership. Bishops and religious congregations issued statements, guidelines for worship, some on health concerns, encouraged their institutions for treating the sick, migrants, and street children. We have also proactive leadership, especially calling to smell the sheep. Mainly the provincials, the superior generals have sent out circulars. Then also, we have also worked well. Some of us also received what we call being corona warrior. They received even the government. I know from India, also from the other countries. Keeping close contact with the other leaders and people of other religions. Well, we can also raise a question how much we kept with people of other religions. Leadership, attitude to our infected confreres, how do we look at that? Or the other brothers and the confreres and our attitude towards infected and affected people. How do we handle them? We showed empathy through mails, also through personal talk or phone calls. The leadership had shown, we know very well, from our own experiences. I know from our experience here at the Generalate here in Rome, the SVD. Did our leadership address the racism, inequality, manipulation, which are the fallout of this particular coronavirus? We know very well, which is happening all over the world. But then did we really address those issues also? Did we address the administration, animation, and coordination concerns? Or we only concentrated only administration? I'm just raising some questions. This is not to say that some did or some did not do, but how could we really improve upon these particular three aspects regarding the leadership? Finally, COVID fund was set aside. The church had set aside, the religious congregation set aside. Certainly your congregation also has set aside. Immediate help was extended. Online donors were sought. There were many good Samaritans, donors in the West and the rest. We also know, from Mumbai, I know very well how many lay people really offer their donors. Our sacrifice towards this fund. Maybe you're looking at Indra. What is our sacrifice? I am aware that some of us really made some sacrifices. Compare our religious community. So in this time, we also look a little critically, compare our religious community as well as the family living outside. So our living standard and the people living outside, especially during this coronavirus. How have we set our finance mechanisms, especially for our conference, for their sickness, for their future, but also for our social ministries? How much or how we have set? I'm just raising some questions. Yes, some have set, probably some may not have set, or some may not have set even sufficiently. So this is just to give a few responses how we have done, especially during Ad Intra. Now coming to Ad Extra, this is where our strength is, the spiritual outreach. Online liturgy services blossomed. The result, ritualism and clericalism. Now, is spirituality limited to priest-centered rituals or limited only to sacraments? Well, this is a question that we need to raise now. Days of prayer, saying rosary, and fasting promoted by Pope and the bishops. Good initiatives, certainly, we have done. But is spirituality confined only online services alone, or could we have done something more, different ways? There are a few countries, done something, different other things than what I'm mentioning here. I cannot mention everything here. In Philippines or in Africa, they have really reached spiritually, especially concentrating on families and family gathering, small communities, and so forth. But what else could have done? Coming to the charity impulse. This is our core strength, loving God and loving our neighbor, So we distributed food, dry rations, sanitizers, kit, etc. Many other things we did. Certainly wonderful work the church has done, especially in Africa and Asia. I need not to name all of them, but you are aware of it, we are aware of it. But then there is also new poor which was emerging. That is, the middle class have become poor. All their savings are gone and they have become really poor, but they are ashamed to beg. How to help them? Caritas India, CHAI, and other NGOs, religious congregations extended help to the vulnerables. And Caritas India, we know that they received even an award from the government for the best NGO in the country, in India. Extended shelter and quarantine facilities as well as psychological support. We did all these, sought the help of the others. Many dioceses and congregations in Asia, Africa tried to help the affected people. Did we reach out to help their rights, to protect their dignity and privacy other than the charity impulses? How did our institutions offer psychological support? Certainly we offered, but how did we do? Could we have done a little better? Therefore, I just asked this question, did we go beyond charity? Or we just stopped with the charity alone? Probably we have done, and certainly done few things, but then how could we do much better, especially in this line? Communication technology. Evangelizing through digital continent was very active, liturgy, meetings, consultations through webinar, as we have now. We found physical distance is not really needed. COVID, a rebirth passes through inclusive technology for all. This is the invitations we have learned, and we have experienced. But what about those who don't have digital facilities? What alternative have we found, especially schools and universities? How can compassion be shown beyond digital world? This is also as important, raising question critically about our response to the people, especially during this COVID. Solidarity in action. COVID-19 is a bomb, the fuse is misery. This is the outline of what you call the committee which was set up by Pope Francis. And those committee members in Vatican, this is what they said, realizing the importance as well as the difficulties we face now. COVID-19, building a healthier future. Vatican Dicastery has set this particular theme with 5 different areas, 5 different commissions to really realize this particular theme. Pope Francis actually are always stressed this during this crisis time. The global crisis requires the parameters of human coexistence be rethought through the lens of solidarity. So he was always asking and telling the world, stick together. The solidarity is the key to response. Therefore, we have seen, the earlier speakers have mentioned, and we have also read and understood the sense of Fratelli Tuti, which is a way to respond in this particular time, and we were trying. Pandemic revived the nationalism, racism, selfishness, and gaining personal profit. Let us not forget about this. We have experienced this in Europe. I know, we know very well the different countries, how they were closing the borders and not allowing the others to come in, and so forth. And the racism, and the way that the solidarity was actually blocked, especially these particular problems were gaining more ground. Therefore, concrete solidarity, working with other NGOs to reach out to the affected, and that was very much thought about it. Interreligious congregational approach, I think your congregation is doing, and there are many other congregations, even our congregation is doing, but could we do a little more on this? And ecumenical efforts were actually, I would say, minimum. Some have done, but we could have done still better. Some talks and webinars, but what we need is solidarity in action, not only just webinars alone, especially with the ecumenical groups in responding to this particular problem. We were reaching out to the other religions, helping everyone. We were trying as religious, as a church, but how far we went to get the help of other religions to work together, and that comes the solidarity. How have we addressed the problems of migration, poverty, and unemployment, etc.? Certainly, we have addressed this in some ways, but then we could also do better. UN called for the pandemic ceasefire. The church supported, certainly, of the pandemic ceasefire in Middle East or in Africa, in other countries, but the groups really adhere to this. Now, this is just to giving a kind of a spectrum of the responses. But what is more important, I would say, is what is our response now? How do we go about, now to really respond to the situations creatively? I try to propose this particular paradigm of prophetic dialogue. You might have heard this, certainly, but I want to just emphasize taking this particular paradigm to really respond to this particular pandemic. Probably it might help as you see tomorrow or the later times how your congregation really wants to respond. Just want to explain a little bit on this. It is an attitude and spirituality being prophetic and dialogical. It is both. It is being prophetic and dialogical. This is a concept we have developed from 2020 onwards as an SVDs in our chapters. Later, It was gaining ground in the theological circles and missiology orientations. Today, it is a commonly accepted term in the wider missiological world. Therefore, key to this particular paradigm, a practice rooted in spirituality, deep listening, deep respect for the context in which one does mission, deep contemplation and prayer with those with whom and among whom one works. And this is how the paradigm really works. Then the action comes afterwards. Therefore, I propose just 4 actions. And in a short time, just I hope to finish. 4 actions. Telling the truth first. It's a prophetic action of telling the truth. The ministry of telling the truth, like Jeremiah and Ezekiel and other prophets in the Old Testament, all the prophets here whom we have experienced, like Nelson Mandela or Gandhiji and so forth. The love of God. See, there is a love of God, telling the truth. This particular pandemic is not punishment. Therefore, being prophets who offer an optimistic message, remembering the misinformations about AIDS, about Ebola virus in Liberia, as well as the Congo. But we have to tell the truth. What is the truth about the virus? What is the truth about God during this particular time? And giving that particular love of God. Therefore, misinformation abounds in this pandemic as well. We have heard from Donald Trump earlier, don't worry, it will go away. It's a misinformation, we know. The church has to tell the truth, like what you call the political leaders like Donald Trump and Jair Bolsonaro from Brazil. They try to manipulate the current crisis for their own benefit. When Trump scattered the protesters and visited the national shrine, both the Episcopal Bishop Pude and the Catholic Bishop Gregory, now he is the cardinal, spoke the truth, charare, the misuse of sacred place. So this is telling the truth. We tell the truth to the people, to the leaders. So telling the truth about women's oppression, telling the truth about clerical abuse and clericalism itself, telling the truth about persistent racism, white privilege, caste privilege, about the plight and rights of the migrants, about the immigrant danger to our planet, about the truth of history from the perspective of indigenous peoples, aboriginals, Dalits, Afro-Americans, etc. Therefore, telling the truth about the people, about present situations. Andrea Bartoli from San Egidio community in Rome, you might have heard this particular community. He was telling, I'm not going to read this, just to give, he is one of the what he call commission members of the task force of Vatican. He said, tell the truth, especially tell the truth in the schools and universities. This is our mission, he said. The second point is of what he call offering hope, a prophetic action of offering hope. What the future is, we do not know, but more accessible healthcare, offering hope, greater efforts of anti-racism, greater preparedness, especially of the church, of our organizations, NGOs, or congregations, affordable education, a less arrogant and selfish West, and the inspiration of doctors and nurses. Nearly 400 priests died in Europe. In Italy, more than 120 priests died. And also, of course, the nurses and the doctors, number of them. A Sri Lankan theologian, Jay Seelan, is a clerist. He says there is a future beyond the pandemic. So therefore, we have to tell the people, there is a future. Just I read this morning, there is Philippines has proposed a Red Wednesday, giving hope. It is a kind of a concept giving to the people. Therefore, Holy Spirit is hard at work, inspiring artists, inspiring scientists, inspiring ordinary people. This particular hope we need to give. This could be one of our responses. The signs of hope in collateral grace. We have heard about collateral damage, but then it is a collateral grace. That means God gives grace through different ways, and we can do it. And this is our prophetic message. Work against injustice. This is normally we understand prophetic way of life. The pandemic has uncovered, revealed the great injustices in many, especially the poorest parts of our world. We have ignored, are culpably ignorant. But then people in the whole earth community need proper health care. They need financial and food security and political stability. Bishops in Philippines called for really a prophetic voice of giving, strength to the community, and they need we need people who can really recognize their racial, cultural, and sexual orientation, the dignity. So we need to really give this particular aspect. WCC, the World Council of Churches, had said exigency of systemic change, which is needed during this particular pandemic time. Pope Francis said, find cure for human and socio-economic viruses. So therefore, fighting against injustices is important. What is happening, in India, I occurred very much, also in other countries, in Africa, also in Asia, corruption. Corruption during pandemic is a double flow. They are sucking the blood of the poor. They are sucking the simple money, little money they have during this very pandemic. Therefore, work against injustice. The Pope calls for solidarity to confront epochal change. This is the message he delivered during Easter. And he said, there is an epochal change. We need solidarity to counter this. This is a fourth one, sustainable human development. Kochurani had just now talked about it. But this is also prophetic action that we need to do in response to this pandemic. Virus has taught how we have harmed the nature, exposed the imbalance of the development. A sustainable future is possible if governance changes. Therefore, if governance changes, certainly sustainable. 2020 has been declared as Love at the Sea, and Vatican has worked out the real way of doing what we call the future programs. Therefore, the rights of nature, and this is the paradigm we need to work on. And this is another way of responding to the pandemic time, especially as religious congregations. Sustainable human development expose the cry of the earth, the cry of the poor, the efforts of the pandemic and the ecological crisis, the injustices and the inequality, the violence. Some act according to sustainable human development paradigm. This is prophetic. We need to act upon it, and that action will really carry the weight. Can our educational ministry show alternative? Okay, now, in other words, can our congregation show alternative? So prophetic, this is my last slide. Prophetic actions, it is also is important in this element, showing constructive alternative. I participated yesterday's seminar. Brother John, in his inaugural address, he mentioned this. Show constructive alternative. Prophets are not only to speak against or speak for, but also showed through their lives, and they showed there is an alternative. Can our congregation do this? Not everybody is a prophetic figure, but everybody needs to listen to the prophetic voice around us and also within our congregation. I think it would help, especially as you discern tomorrow or other days regarding what are your actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Stani, for that very insightful intervention, telling the truth, offering hope, work against injustice, sustainable human development as our constructive prophetic responses. In fact, I was looking at a demonstration of care and offering hope has been the response of the Christian community in every epoch during every pandemic. And I just wanted to read a very short paragraph from St. Eusebius, Bishop Eusebius, the historian, the Bishop of Caesarea in the 4th century. This is what he said. For thereon, that is the Christians, in the midst of such ills, showed their sympathy and humanity by their deeds. Every day, they continued caring for and burying the dead when there was no one to bury the dead, when dead bodies were strewn on the streets. For there were multitudes who had no one to care for them. Others collected in one place those who were afflicted by the famine throughout the entire city and gave bread to them all, feeding the hungry. so that the thing became reported abroad among all men, and they glorified the God of the Christians. And one of the secrets of how and why Christianity grew in the Roman Empire, they say, is the way they responded. The Christian community responded, and the Christian leadership responded to pandemics, pandemic after pandemic. So I think this is something that we need to re-examine. Pandemic, COVID-19 is not going to disappear in a hurry. How we as religious brothers respond to the pandemic, going beyond feeding the hungry, to be prophetic voices of hope. Thank you, Stanley, for that very insightful intervention.